When I saw Ethan's phone vibrating on the kitchen counter that Tuesday morning, my first instinct was to ignore it. My 24-year-old son had rushed out the door 15 minutes earlier, coffee still steaming in his abandoned mug, muttering something about a crucial meeting with his MBA advisor. The device buzzed again, insistent, and the screen lit up with a message preview. I wasn't trying to snoop. I want to be clear about that. After raising 2 sons and building a $4 million interior design business from scratch, I've learned to respect boundaries. But the notification was right there, impossible to miss. And what caught my attention wasn't the text itself. It was the contact photo. My own face stared back at me from that screen. It was the picture Richard had taken at my 56th birthday party 3 months ago, the one where I'm wearing that cobalt blue dress from Nordstrom and laughing at something Sophie said. My hair was freshly highlighted, those subtle caramel tones I'd been perfecting for years, catching the light just right. I remembered that moment so clearly because I'd felt beautiful that day, genuinely happy, surrounded by family. But it was the contact name beneath my smiling face that made my hands go numb. The old controller. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. The phone buzzed again and the full message appeared. Your plan worked perfectly, babe. She has no clue about anything. When are you finally going to grow a pair and cut the umbilical cord? The old controller is keeping you from living your real life. The sender was Isabel, Ethan's girlfriend of 8 months. The woman I'd welcomed into our home, cooked dinner for, tried so hard to connect with despite the gnawing feeling in my gut that something about her wasn't quite right. My breath caught in my throat. I set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode, and gripped the edge of the marble countertop. The kitchen suddenly felt too bright, too quiet, the morning sun streaming through the windows like an interrogation lamp. 24 years of motherhood, of sacrifice, of unconditional love, and this is what my son called me behind my back. This is how he saw me. I picked up the phone again, my hands trembling now. I told myself to stop, to respect his privacy, to put it down and walk away. But I couldn't. The words, "Your plan worked perfectly," kept echoing in my mind. What plan? What was I supposedly clueless about? I scrolled up in the conversation. The messages went back weeks. My stomach twisted tighter with each one I read. Ethan complaining to Isabel about me, about how I was suffocating him, how I controlled every aspect of his life with money and expectations, how I couldn't accept that he was an adult now. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Me? Controlling? I'd given that boy everything. I'd paid for his entire undergraduate degree at Boston University without a single complaint, even when he switched majors twice and added an extra year. I'd covered his expenses when he'd failed that economics class sophomore year, the one he'd hidden from Richard and me for 3 months until we found out from the bursar's office. I'd bought him a practically new Honda Accord for his 22nd birthday when his old car died, not because he asked, but because I couldn't stand the thought of my son taking the subway in Boston winters. The messages got worse. Isabel's responses were poison, pure and simple. She treats you like property, not a person. You'll never be your own man as long as you're dependent on her. Your mother has this desperate need to control you because her own life wasn't enough. She's one of those women who defines herself entirely through her children. It's pathetic, really. Pathetic. That word hit me like a physical blow. I'd built my interior design boutique from a $50,000 inheritance from my Aunt Eleanor when I was 28 years old. I'd survived a painful divorce from my first husband, picked myself up, met Richard, and created a life I was proud of. I'd grown that little boutique into a thriving business with 12 employees and clients across New England. I'd never defined myself solely as a mother. I'd always been Vivian Ashford, businesswoman, wife, friend, and yes, mother too. But never just mother. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not yet. I kept scrolling, needing to understand the full scope of whatever this was. Then I found the messages from 3 weeks ago. Ethan had asked me for money, $15,000. He'd come into my home office on a Saturday afternoon, looking nervous but sincere, and explained that a colleague from his MBA program had an investment opportunity. A guaranteed return, he'd said. Low risk, high reward. He needed to act fast before the window closed. I'd hesitated for maybe 30 seconds. Then I'd transferred the money from my business account to his checking account without another thought. Because that's what mothers do. We trust our children. We support their dreams. We want them to succeed. Now I was reading the truth. Baby, the 15,000 cleared. I can't believe she fell for it so easily. You were right. All I had to do was mention investment opportunity, and she practically threw money at me. God, she's so desperate to feel like a good mother. My knees buckled. I grabbed a bar stool and sat down hard, the phone clutched in my shaking hands. The conversation continued. Ethan explaining to Isabel that he'd used my money to pay off credit card debt. $23,000 in debt I'd known nothing about. Purchases at Bloomingdale's, expensive dinners at restaurants I couldn't even pronounce, a long weekend in Miami that he'd told me was sponsored by the business school, for a conference. All lies, all of it. And Isabel encouraging him, praising him for finally taking control of his own finances, for not letting the old controller dictate his life anymore. I sat there in my kitchen, in the home Richard and I had bought 15 years ago, surrounded by the life we'd built together, and felt something inside me crack. Not break, not shatter, but crack in a way that would leave permanent marks. This wasn't just betrayal. This was systematic deception. This was my son viewing me as an ATM machine with an annoying personality attached. The worst part? The messages showed that this had been going on for months, since before he'd even met Isabel. I scrolled back further and found messages between Ethan and his brother Dylan from 6 months ago, before Isabel was in the picture. I know you're the golden child and I'm just the other one, Ethan had written to Dylan. Mom has more passion for that stupid boutique than she ever had for me. You got all the attention because you were older, you were the first. I was just the backup kid. Everything I do is compared to you. I'm so tired of being second place in her life. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I pressed my hand against my mouth to muffle the sob that rose in my throat. Had I done that to him? Had I made him feel like second place? I thought back through the years, trying to remember. Yes, there were times when work consumed me. When I was expanding the boutique, taking on bigger clients, building something that could support our family. When I'd canceled that special trip we'd planned for his 21st birthday because a major client needed a complete redesign, finished by a deadline. He'd smiled when I'd explained. He'd said he understood. He'd hugged me and said, "It's fine, Mom. We can do it another time." But we never had. And apparently, he'd never forgiven me. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30 in the morning. Richard was in New York for 3 days on a business trip. Dylan and Sophie were in Manhattan, living their successful young lives, and I was alone in this kitchen, holding evidence that my younger son saw me as an obstacle to overcome rather than a mother who loved him. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Isabel. "Don't forget, we have that dinner with my parents tonight. Wear the Ralph Lauren sweater I got you. And please, try to stand up to her if she calls. You promised you were done being her little puppet." Her little puppet. Something shifted inside me then. The grief and shock began hardening into something else, something colder, something that had been forged through building a business in a male-dominated industry, through surviving a divorce that tried to destroy me, through every challenge I'd faced and overcome in my 56 years. I took a screenshot of every relevant message. Then I went to my laptop and created a new folder, labeling it simply Evidence. I uploaded the screenshots, then I opened my banking app and pulled up every transaction I'd made on Ethan's behalf for the past 6 years since he'd turned 18. Tuition payments, rent, car insurance, that new MacBook Pro he'd needed for school, the emergency dental work, the suit for his internship interviews, the furniture for his apartment. I created a spreadsheet. Line by line, I documented everything. Every dollar, every date, every reason. When I finished 2 hours later, the total was $287,000, nearly $300,000 I'd given my son, freely and with love, believing I was supporting his future. And he'd taken it while calling me the old controller behind my back. I saved the spreadsheet. Then I called my attorney, Marcus Chen, a man I'd worked with for years on business contracts. "Marcus, I need a formal loan repayment agreement drafted," I said when he answered. My voice was steady now, cold and clear. $15,000 with interest. and I need a complete audit of financial support provided to an adult dependent. Can you do this? Of course, Vivian, he said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. Is everything all right? Everything is about to be very clear, I told him. I'll email you the details within the hour. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and finally let myself feel the full weight of it. The betrayal, the lies, the casual cruelty of that nickname, the way my son had reduced years of love and support into something ugly and controlling. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. A determination I recognized from every other time in my life when someone had underestimated me. My first husband, who'd thought I'd crumble without him. The banker who'd laughed when I'd asked for a business loan. The competitors who'd assumed a woman couldn't succeed in high-end interior design. They'd all been wrong. Ethan would be coming home eventually. He'd walk through that door expecting to find his mother, the woman he'd dismissed as the old controller, the ATM machine with inconvenient opinions. What he'd find instead was Vivian Ashford, the woman who'd built something from nothing, the woman who'd survived and thrived, the woman who was about to teach her son the most expensive lesson of his life. I picked up his phone one more time and placed it exactly where he'd left it, screen down. Let him think it was still his secret. Let him believe I was still clueless. But the game had changed, and he didn't even know it yet. I need to explain how we got here, how a mother who thought she knew her son could be so completely blind to what was happening right under her nose. The truth is, the signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. Ethan was born on a snowy February morning 24 years ago, 3 weeks early and screaming his lungs out. From that first moment, he was different from Dylan. Where his older brother had been calm and easy, Ethan was demanding, restless, always needing something more. More attention, more reassurance, more of everything. I told myself it was just his personality, that some children simply needed more than others. Richard used to joke that Ethan came out of the womb negotiating. Even as a toddler, he'd bargain for extra cookies, more playtime, another bedtime story. I thought it was charming then, a sign of intelligence and quick thinking. Now I wonder if it was the early warning of a pattern I chose to ignore. Dylan had been 4 when Ethan was born, already independent and self-sufficient in that way some first children are. He'd adapted to having a baby brother with surprising grace, but I remember catching glimpses of something in his eyes sometimes when Ethan would cry, and I'd have to leave whatever we were doing together. A flash of resignation, maybe even sadness, that his little brother needed me more. The business was just getting started then. I'd taken Aunt Eleanor's inheritance and opened a tiny office in Cambridge, barely more than a closet with a desk and a phone line. Richard was working impossible hours at the real estate firm, trying to build his own career. We were both ambitious, both driven, both determined to give our sons a better life than we'd had. I thought we were setting a good example, showing them that hard work and dedication paid off. Maybe that's where I went wrong. Maybe Ethan saw my passion for the business not as inspiration, but as competition for my affection. The boutique grew faster than I'd anticipated. Within 3 years, I had 5 employees and clients who paid premium prices for my designs. Within 5 years, I was featured in Boston Magazine. By the time Ethan was 10, Ashford Interiors was one of the most respected design firms in New England. I was proud of what I'd built. I still am. But success came at a cost I didn't fully understand at the time. There were soccer games I missed because of client meetings, school plays where Richard sat alone because I was overseeing an installation. The time Ethan won the science fair in 6th grade, and I arrived 30 minutes late because traffic was horrible coming back from a site visit in Providence. He'd already packed up his project by the time I got there, his face carefully neutral when he saw me. "It's okay, Mom," he'd said, that same phrase he'd use again and again over the years. "I know you're busy." But it wasn't okay, was it? I can see that now, sitting in this kitchen with evidence of his resentment pulled up on multiple screens around me. Every time he said it was fine, he was adding another brick to a wall I couldn't see building between us. Dylan never seemed to mind my absences the same way. He'd been old enough when the business started to understand what I was doing and why. He'd even helped sometimes, spending afternoons at the office doing homework while I finished proposals. We'd bonded over those shared spaces, those quiet hours where he saw me working toward something. Ethan never had that. By the time he was old enough to understand, the business was already established. He only saw the finished product, the success, the time it took away from him. He didn't see the years of struggle, the nights I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning working on designs after putting him to bed. He didn't see the sacrifice, only the absence. I tried to compensate. God, I tried. I threw him elaborate birthday parties, bought him whatever he wanted, made sure he had every advantage. When he expressed interest in photography at 15, I bought him a professional-grade camera. When he wanted to learn piano, I hired the best teacher in Boston. When he got into Boston University, I didn't even blink at the tuition costs. Money was my language of love because time was something I never seemed to have enough of. And Ethan learned to speak that language fluently. He learned that Mom could be counted on for financial support, that I'd always say yes to requests that came wrapped in ambitious dreams and promising futures. The difference between my two sons became more pronounced as they got older. Dylan worked part-time jobs through college, even though he didn't need to. He'd paid for his own spring break trips, his own weekend activities. He'd graduated and immediately thrown himself into building his career, rarely asking us for help beyond the basics we insisted on providing. Ethan, on the other hand, had grown comfortable in the safety net I'd constructed for him. He dropped out of 2 internships because they weren't the right fit. He'd changed his major from business to psychology to economics, each switch adding time and money to his degree. And I'd supported every decision, believing I was being a flexible, understanding mother who trusted her son to find his own path. Richard had tried to talk to me about it several times. I remember one conversation particularly clearly, about 2 years ago. We were in bed, late at night, and he'd said, "Viv, I think we need to start setting some boundaries with Ethan. He's 22. He needs to learn responsibility." I'd defended our son immediately. "He's figuring things out. Not everyone has their life planned at 22 like Dylan did. We need to give him space to grow." "Space to grow or space to avoid growing up?" Richard had asked gently. "There's a difference." I'd been annoyed with him then, felt like he was being too harsh on our youngest. Now I wonder if he'd seen something I'd refused to acknowledge. Richard had always been more willing to let our sons struggle, to let them face natural consequences. I'd always been the one to step in, to smooth things over, to fix whatever was broken. The controller. Maybe Ethan had a point in his own cruel way. When Ethan had introduced us to Isabel 8 months ago, I'd felt that immediate discomfort that mothers sometimes get. She was too polished, too calculated, too interested in the details of our financial situation. At 34, she was 10 years older than Ethan, and while I'd tried not to be judgmental about the age gap, something felt off. "She's very ambitious," Ethan had said proudly over dinner that first night. "She's an executive at a marketing firm downtown." Isabel had smiled, perfectly lipsticked, perfectly coiffed, and said all the right things about respecting family and being patient with their relationship. But her eyes had assessed everything in our home, calculating values, measuring wealth. I'd caught her looking at the artwork on our walls, the designer furniture, the subtle indicators of money. Sophie, Dylan's wife, had pulled me aside later that week and said, "I don't want to overstep, Vivian, but there's something about Ethan's new girlfriend that feels performative, like she's playing a role." I'd brushed it off. "You're probably just being protective of your brother-in-law. I'm sure she's fine." But Sophie had been right. They'd both been right, Richard and Sophie, seeing what I'd refused to see because I was so desperate to believe that my son was happy, that he was making good choices, that I'd done enough as a mother. The reproduced economics course should have been my wake-up call. Ethan had hidden it for months, only admitting the truth when the dean's office sent a formal letter about his academic standing. He'd cried when he told me, said he'd been too ashamed to say anything, that he'd been struggling with depression and couldn't focus. I'd held him and reassured him that everyone struggles sometimes, that grades weren't everything, that we'd get through it together. I'd even found him a therapist, paid for weekly sessions for 6 months. He'd gone to maybe 4 appointments before claiming he didn't need it anymore, that he was feeling better. Another lie I'd been too willing to believe. The trip I'd canceled for his 21st birthday haunted me now as I sat surrounded by evidence of his betrayal. We'd planned to go to California together, just the two of us, a mother-son trip to celebrate his becoming an adult. But the Wentworth contract had come through, a massive project that could establish Ashford Interiors as one of the premier firms on the East Coast. The timing was terrible, but the opportunity was once in a lifetime. I'd explained all this to Ethan, expecting him to understand. "We'll reschedule," I'd promised. "Maybe during your winter break, we'll make it even better." He'd smiled that smile I now recognized as his mask. "Sure, Mom, whatever works for you." We never rescheduled. Winter break came and went, and by then he was busy with his own plans. I'd sent him $5,000 instead, told him to take some friends somewhere fun. He'd gone to Cabo with a group from school and posted pictures that looked like he was having a great time. I'd thought I'd solved the problem with money, the way I always did. But I'd just taught him that Mom's love came with a price tag, and that his disappointment could be bought off. Sitting here now, I could trace the pattern back through all 24 years. Every time I'd chosen work over him. Every time I'd solved a problem with money instead of time. Every time I'd believed his assurances that everything was fine, when clearly nothing was fine. I'd created this situation, not intentionally, not maliciously, but through 1,000 small choices that prioritized building a legacy over being present. And Ethan had learned to resent me for it, to see me not as a flawed human being trying her best, but as the old controller, someone whose love was conditional and transactional. The question was, what did I do about it now? Did I own my part in this dysfunction and try to repair it? Or did I hold him accountable for lying, stealing, and mocking me behind my back, regardless of whatever pain I might have caused him? I looked at the spreadsheet on my laptop again. $287,000, years of financial support, and underneath all of it, the desperate hope of a mother who'd thought she could buy back time she'd never given. The truth was, we were both wrong. I'd failed him in some ways, yes, but he'd made his choices too, and those choices had consequences that were about to become very, very real. I spent the rest of that Tuesday morning doing what I do best, planning, strategizing, building a case with the same meticulous attention to detail I'd bring to a major design project. The difference was that this time, the project was my own son's reckoning. By noon, I had everything organized. Marcus had already sent over a draft of the loan repayment agreement, professionally worded and legally binding. I'd compiled 6 years of financial records into a comprehensive document that would make any accountant proud. And I'd screenshotted every relevant conversation from Ethan's phone, each one time-stamped and saved in multiple locations. But I didn't confront him immediately. That would have been too easy, too reactionary. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I needed to see how deep the manipulation went. Ethan came home around 6 that evening. I heard his key in the lock, heard him call out, "Mom, I'm back," in that cheerful voice that now sounded completely false to my ears. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner like I did most Tuesday nights when Richard was away on business. Chicken marsala, one of Ethan's favorites. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice steady and warm. "How was your meeting?" He grabbed his phone from the counter where I'd carefully replaced it, checking it quickly before sliding it into his pocket. "Long and boring. Dr. Morrison wanted to discuss my thesis proposal for like 2 hours. I'm starving." "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, I told him, watching him head toward his old bedroom where he'd been staying the past few days while his apartment building dealt with a plumbing issue. Another expense I'd offered to help with, suggesting he could stay at a hotel on my dime. He'd insisted our guest room was fine. Now I wondered if he'd chosen to stay here because it was free or because it gave him better access to manipulate me. Over dinner, I asked casual questions about school, about his plans for the semester, about Isabel. He answered everything smoothly, easily, spinning a narrative of a young man working hard and building a future. He even thanked me again for the $15,000, said the investment was looking promising. Every word was a lie, delivered with a smile. I played along perfectly. Decades of dealing with difficult clients had taught me how to mask my feelings, how to project warmth while calculating next moves. But inside, I was cataloging everything. The way he checked his phone constantly, smiling at messages I now knew were from Isabel. The way he casually mentioned needing new tires for his car soon, the leading statement that would typically prompt me to offer to pay for them. "I'm sure you can budget for that from the money you're making from your investment," I said pleasantly. He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "Oh, well, that money's tied up for a while. Returns don't come immediately." "Of course," I said. "That's how investments work." After dinner, he helped me clean up, chatting about his upcoming week. It was such a normal evening, such a familiar routine, that I almost questioned what I'd seen that morning. Almost convinced myself I'd overreacted, that there was some explanation that would make it all make sense. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, and his whole face changed, softened in a way I recognized. That look wasn't for me. It was for her. "I need to make a call," he said. "Isabel and I are supposed to grab dinner tomorrow night with her parents." "That sounds serious," I commented, loading the dishwasher. "Yeah, I guess so." He looked uncomfortable. "She's been wanting me to meet them for a while now." After he left the room, I stood at the sink and let myself feel the anger properly for the first time. This woman who'd been poisoning my son against me was bringing him deeper into her world, and he was going willingly, meeting the parents, getting serious, building a life that apparently I had no place in except as a punchline and an ATM. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. His name was James Mitchell, recommended by Marcus when I'd called him back with additional questions. "If you really want to know what's going on, Vivian, James is the best. Discreet, thorough, and fast." I met James at a coffee shop in Cambridge the next morning, Wednesday. He was in his 50s, unremarkable looking in the way that probably served him well in his profession. I showed him the screenshots, explained the situation, and asked him to find out everything he could about Isabel Moreau. "I need to know who she really is," I told him. "What she wants, what her history looks like, whether my son is being deliberately manipulated or if I'm just a paranoid mother who can't accept that her child doesn't like her very much." James took notes, asked pointed questions, and promised me preliminary results within 48 hours. In my experience, Mrs. Ashford, when someone's instincts are telling them something's wrong, they're usually right, especially mothers. While I waited for James's report, I started making other calls. I phoned Sophie first, asking if she and Dylan could come to Boston that weekend. "I need to talk to you both about something important," I said. "Family matter." Sophie's voice immediately filled with concern. "Is everything okay? Is it Richard?" "Richard's fine. Everyone's fine. I just need to discuss something in person." Next, I called my best friend Margaret Chen. We'd known each other for 20 years, since we'd met at a gallery opening and bonded over our shared love of modern art and dry martinis. Margaret was divorced twice, fiercely independent, and the only person I knew who would tell me the absolute truth without sugarcoating anything. "I need your opinion on something," I told her over lunch at our favorite bistro in Back Bay. Then I showed her everything: the messages, the nickname, the lies about the money. Margaret's face darkened as she read. When she finally looked up, her expression was a mixture of fury and sympathy. "That little bastard," she said bluntly. "Vivian, I love you, but you need to hear this. You've let him get away with too much for too long. You've been trying to compensate for working hard and building something, and he's learned to exploit that guilt." "I know," I said quietly. "I see that now. What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to let him think everything's normal until this weekend. Then I'm going to lay it all out in front of the whole family and watch him try to explain himself." Margaret nodded approvingly. "Good. He needs to face consequences. And Vivian?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're not a bad mother. You're a mother who worked hard and succeeded. There's nothing wrong with that. What he's doing? That's a choice he's making. Don't let him or that manipulative girlfriend make you believe otherwise." Her words helped, but they didn't erase the guilt that sat heavy in my chest. I kept thinking about that message Ethan had sent Dylan months ago, about feeling second place, about thinking I cared more about the boutique than about him. There was truth in those feelings, even if his response to them was unacceptable. Thursday morning, I got a call from my accountant, Tom Bradford. I'd asked him to review some transactions from Ethan's accounts that I had access to as a co-signer from when he'd first opened them at 18. "Vivian, I've gone through everything you sent me," Tom said. "I need to tell you, this is worse than you think. The credit card debt isn't just from the past few months. It goes back almost 2 years. He's been making minimum payments, rolling balances, taking cash advances." The interest alone is probably close to $5,000 by now. My stomach dropped. 2 years? At least. And there are some charges here that concern me. Multiple purchases at high-end jewelry stores, several payments to something called Elite Accommodations, which appears to be a luxury vacation rental company, charges at restaurants and clubs that would run a normal person's monthly food budget. Send me everything, I said. I want to see all of it. The report Tom sent over was damning. Ethan had been living far beyond any reasonable means for years, funding a lifestyle that even my successful career couldn't justify at his age. And he'd hidden all of it, carefully concealing statements, making sure I never saw the truth. I thought about all the times he'd mentioned being tight on cash or needing help with unexpected expenses. Every single time, I'd helped. And every single time, I'd been funding his deception. Friday afternoon, James, the private investigator, called. I have your preliminary report. Can we meet? We met at the same coffee shop. James slid a folder across the table, his expression grim. You were right to be concerned. Isabel Moreau has a pattern. I opened the folder and started reading. Isabel had been fired from her previous job at a marketing firm, not for the generic restructuring she'd probably told Ethan, but for ethical violations. She'd falsified campaign metrics, inflated results to clients, and when caught, had tried to blame junior staff members. But that wasn't the worst of it. She's had 3 relationships in the past 5 years that I was able to confirm, James said, all with younger men from wealthy families. The first one, she dated for a year before his parents staged an intervention. The second ended when the guy's trust fund got tied up in legal issues and suddenly she wasn't interested anymore. The third one, that's interesting. He filed a restraining order against her after they broke up. On what grounds? Harassment, threatening behavior, showing up at his workplace and his parents' homemaking scenes. The order was granted, but she moved to a different state for a while, and it eventually expired. I stared at the documents in front of me. So she targets young men with money. Or more specifically, young men with mothers who have money. Look at the pattern. All 3 previous boyfriends had successful, wealthy mothers. In 2 cases, divorced mothers. She seems to seek out men with complicated maternal relationships. The pieces were clicking into place in the most disturbing way. She's not just manipulating him for money. She's competing with me. That would be my assessment. And your son, I'm sorry to say, is an ideal target. Old enough to feel independent, young enough to be easily influenced, resentful enough of his mother's success to be vulnerable to someone who validates that resentment. I closed the folder, feeling sick. Does he know about her history? I doubt it. She's careful. Uses different social media accounts, changed jobs and cities enough to make background checks difficult. Your son probably sees her as a sophisticated older woman who believes in him. That night, Ethan came home late, claiming he'd been studying at the library. He was in a good mood, humming as he raided the refrigerator. I watched him from the doorway of the kitchen, this young man I'd raised, and tried to reconcile the child I'd loved with the person who'd betrayed me so completely. Mom, you okay? He asked, noticing me watching him. Just tired, I said. Long week. You work too hard, he said, and there was something in his tone that might have been genuine concern or might have been mockery. I couldn't tell anymore. Maybe, I replied, but that hard work paid for a lot, didn't it? He looked at me strangely, as if trying to determine if there was a hidden meaning in my words. Yeah, of course. I'm grateful for everything you and Dad have done. Grateful. The word felt hollow. Saturday morning, Dylan and Sophie arrived. I'd told Ethan they were coming for a regular family weekend. Nothing unusual. He seemed fine with it, probably glad to have his brother around as a buffer. Richard had flown back Friday night. I'd shown him everything. The messages, James's report, the financial records. My husband, usually so calm and measured, had gone pale. I want to kill him, Richard had said quietly. Our own son. Get in line, I'd replied. But Richard had also said something that stuck with me. Viv, you know we have to be united on this. We can't let emotion make us do something we'll regret. We need to be strategic. He was right. This wasn't just about punishing Ethan. It was about teaching him a lesson that might actually change him, that might force him to grow up and take responsibility for his choices. Saturday afternoon, I suggested we all have dinner together that evening. It's been too long since we've had the whole family around the table, I said brightly. Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable. I was supposed to see Isabel tonight. Bring her, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. I'd love to get to know her better. His discomfort increased. I don't know if that's a good idea, Mom. It might be too much too soon. Nonsense. If you're serious enough to meet her parents, we should get to know her too. I insist. I could see him trying to find an excuse, but with Dylan and Sophie watching, with Richard nodding in agreement, he was trapped. Okay, he finally said. I'll ask her. 20 minutes later, he reported that Isabel would be joining us for dinner at 7. Perfect. I spent the afternoon preparing everything. Not just the meal, though I made sure to cook enough for an army, all of Ethan's childhood favorites, but also the documents. Marcus had delivered final versions of everything that morning: the loan agreement, the financial history, the investigator's report. I arranged them all in neat folders, one for each family member. Margaret called to check in. You're sure you want to do this? It's going to be ugly. It's already ugly, I told her. Now it's just going to be honest. At 6:30, I set the dining room table with our good china. The irony of that wasn't lost on me either, using the expensive dishes I'd worked so hard to be able to afford for a dinner where I'd confront my son about exploiting that very success. Dylan found me in the kitchen at 6:45. Mom, what's really going on? You've been acting strange all day. I looked at my older son, this man who'd grown up to be everything I'd hoped both my children would be: honest, hardworking, independent, kind. You'll find out soon enough. But Dylan, I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens tonight, no matter how angry you get, let me handle this my way. His eyes narrowed with concern. You're scaring me. I'm scaring myself, I admitted. But this needs to happen. The doorbell rang at 7 exactly. Ethan answered it, and I heard Isabel's voice from the entryway, bright and false. Mrs. Ashford, thank you so much for inviting me. I brought wine. I came out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on a towel, and smiled at her. Isabel, how lovely. Please come in. She was dressed perfectly, of course. Expensive casual, the kind of outfit that looked effortless, but probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves, her makeup flawless. She air-kissed my cheeks and handed me a bottle of wine that I recognized as costing at least $80. Bought with whose money, I wondered. We all gathered in the dining room. I'd arranged the seating carefully. Richard at one head of the table, me at the other. Dylan and Sophie on one side, Ethan and Isabel on the other. Like a trial, with the defendants facing their judges. The meal started pleasantly enough. Small talk, polite questions. Isabel charming everyone with practiced ease. She complimented the house, the food, my decorating taste. She asked Sophie about her law practice, asked Dylan about his work in finance. She was performing perfectly. I let it play out, watching Ethan relax as the dinner progressed smoothly. He probably thought he'd dodged whatever concern had been worrying him. He probably thought this was just a normal family dinner, that his mother had decided to play nice with his girlfriend. We were halfway through the main course when I decided it was time. I set down my fork carefully and looked directly at my younger son. Ethan, I need to ask you something. How's that investment opportunity going? The one you needed $15,000 for? He swallowed his food quickly, glanced at Isabel. It's good, Mom. Like I said, these things take time. That's interesting, I said calmly. Because according to your bank records, which as a co-signer I have access to, you didn't invest that money at all. You used it to pay off credit card debt. Debt you've been hiding from your father and me for 2 years. The table went completely silent. The color drained from Ethan's face so quickly, I thought he might actually faint. Isabel's perfectly composed expression flickered for just a second before she recovered, placing a manicured hand on Ethan's arm in what I'm sure she thought was a supportive gesture. Dylan set down his wine glass with a sharp clink. What? I kept my eyes locked on Ethan. Would you like to explain or should I continue? Mom, I can explain, he started, but his voice cracked. Please do, I said, my tone still eerily calm. Explain to your father and brother how you lied about needing money for an investment. Explain the $23,000 in credit card debt. Explain the charges at jewelry stores and luxury hotels and restaurants that cost more per meal than most families spend on groceries in a month. Sophie's hand had moved to her mouth. Richard's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. But it was Dylan's face that held pure disbelief, like he was watching a stranger instead of his brother. "You have no right to go through my bank records," Ethan said, and I could hear him trying to muster some indignation, some defense. "I have every right. I'm a co-signer on those accounts. You were 18 when we opened them, remember? You needed a parent's signature." I reached under my seat and pulled out the first folder, sliding it across the table toward him. "This is a complete audit of every dollar your father and I have given you since you turned 18. Tuition, rent, car, insurance, living expenses, emergency funds, gifts. The total comes to $287,000. Isabel's eyes widened slightly at the number. I saw her calculating, saw the wheels turning in that manipulative mind of hers. "I worked hard to provide that support," I continued. "I built a business from nothing so that my sons would never have to struggle the way I did. And you took that generosity and turned it into something ugly." "Vivian," Isabel interjected smoothly, "I think maybe we should all take a breath here. Ethan made a mistake, but going through his private finances, ambushing him at a family dinner—" "I wasn't speaking to you," I said, cutting her off with a sharpness that surprised even me. "But since you brought yourself into this conversation, let's talk about your role in all of this." I pulled out the second folder, this one considerably thicker. "This is a report from a private investigator. It contains information about your employment history, including your termination from Sterling Marketing for falsifying client reports. It contains information about your previous relationships, all with younger men from wealthy families. And it contains information about the restraining order filed against you by Trevor Hutchinson in Connecticut 2 years ago." Isabel's face went from composed to frozen. Ethan's head snapped toward her. "What? What is she talking about?" "This is insane," Isabel said, standing up from the table. "You hired someone to investigate me? That's completely inappropriate, not to mention probably illegal." "It's completely legal, actually," Sophie said quietly, her lawyer voice emerging. "Private investigators work within the bounds of the law, gathering only public records and legally obtainable information." "Ethan, we're leaving," Isabel said, grabbing her purse. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, the screenshots already pulled up. "Before you go, I think Ethan should see these. They're from your text conversations with him. Conversations I saw on Tuesday morning when he left his phone at home." I turned the phone so everyone could see. The first screenshot showed clearly, "The old controller is keeping you from living your real life." Ethan stared at it, confusion crossing his features. Then I swiped to the next one. "Your plan worked perfectly, babe. She has no clue about anything." And the next one. "She's desperate to feel like a good mother." "You saved me in your phone as the old controller?" I asked my son. And for the first time that evening, my voice shook slightly. "That's what I am to you? After everything I've done, every sacrifice I've made, that's how you see me?" "Mom, Isabel was just—" he stammered, looking between his girlfriend and me. "I was just what?" Isabel snapped at him, apparently realizing the ship was sinking and deciding to save herself first. "You're the one who came up with that nickname, Ethan. You're the one who complained about your mother constantly. I just listened and supported you." "That's not true," Ethan said weakly, but we all heard the lack of conviction in his voice. Dylan stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. "Are you kidding me right now? Mom paid for everything, everything. And this is how you talk about her? This is what you do behind her back?" "You don't understand," Ethan said, and now there were tears in his eyes. "You were always the perfect son, Dylan. Everything came easy for you. I was always second place, always compared to you, always—" "That's bullshit, and you know it," Dylan interrupted, his voice rising. "Mom and Dad treated us exactly the same. If anything, you got away with more because you were younger. You're not a victim here, Ethan. You're just a liar and a thief." "Dylan," Richard said quietly, placing a hand on his older son's arm. To Ethan, he said, "Your brother's angry, but he's not wrong. You made choices, son. Bad choices. Choices that hurt your mother, that violated her trust, that demonstrated a complete lack of integrity." Ethan was crying openly now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort him the way I had his entire life. I just felt cold and clear and determined. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out the final folder. This is a formal loan repayment agreement for the $15,000, with interest. You have 12 months to repay it in full, or I will pursue legal action. This is also a complete termination of financial support. The car that's registered in my name needs to be returned by Monday. The apartment I've been paying for, you have 60 days to find alternative arrangements. Your spring semester MBA tuition is already paid, but that's the last educational expense I'll cover. You are, as of this moment, financially independent. You can't do this, Isabel said, but she sounded less certain now. I absolutely can. And I am. I looked at her directly. As for you, I suggest you leave my house now. And if you ever contact any member of my family again, I'll make sure that restraining order in Connecticut looks like a minor inconvenience compared to what I'll pursue here in Massachusetts. Isabel grabbed her coat, her mask of sophistication completely shattered. She looked at Ethan expectantly, waiting for him to leave with her, to choose her over his family. He sat frozen in his chair, tears streaming down his face. "Ethan," she prompted, voice sharp. "I think you should go," he whispered. For a moment, I saw pure rage flash across her face. Then she turned on her heel and walked out. We heard the front door slam seconds later. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan sat there, broken and exposed, facing the consequences of months of deception. And I sat at the head of my dining room table, surrounded by the family I'd built and nearly lost, feeling something shift fundamentally in the foundation of who we were to each other. "Mom," Ethan finally said, his voice small and wrecked. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I said, "but sorry isn't enough. Not this time." The silence stretched on after Isabel's dramatic exit, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing and the distant sound of her car peeling out of our driveway. My younger son sat at the table looking smaller than I'd seen him since he was a child, his shoulders hunched, hands trembling as they gripped the edge of his chair. Dylan was still standing, his entire body radiating fury. Sophie had her hand on his arm, a gentle restraint that I was grateful for because I could see my older son calculating whether to lunge across the table at his brother. "Sit down, Dylan," Richard said firmly. "Let your mother finish." Dylan sat, but his eyes never left Ethan. "I can't believe you. I actually can't believe you would do this to Mom." "You don't understand what it's been like," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "Being compared to you constantly, never being good enough." "Don't you dare," I interrupted, and the steel in my voice made everyone at the table flinch. "Don't you dare try to blame your brother for your choices. Don't you dare make yourself the victim in a situation where you lied, stole, and mocked me behind my back for months." "I didn't steal from you," he protested weakly. "You obtained money under false pretenses." "In legal terms, that's fraud," Sophie said quietly, her lawyer voice clinical and devastating. "If your mother wanted to press charges, she'd have a strong case." Ethan's face went even paler. "You wouldn't. Mom, please, you wouldn't." "I don't know what I'm going to do yet," I said honestly. "That depends entirely on what happens next, on whether you're actually capable of taking responsibility for what you've done, or whether you're going to continue lying to yourself and everyone else." "I take responsibility," he said quickly, desperately. "I do, I'm sorry. I made terrible mistakes." "Mistakes?" Dylan exploded. "You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to lie. You chose to manipulate. You chose to mock our mother with that woman. Those weren't accidents, Ethan. Those were deliberate acts." "Dylan's right," Richard said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Son, I've been quiet through most of this because your mother deserved to say her piece. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money. This is about character. This is about who you've become. And right now, I don't recognize you." Those words hit Ethan harder than anything else had. I watched my son crumble further, his face crumpling as he started to sob properly. "Dad, please." "No," Richard continued. "You need to hear this. Your mother and I raised you to be honest, to be kind, to treat people with respect. We taught you that actions have consequences. And somewhere along the way, you decided those lessons didn't apply to you. You decided you could take and never have to give anything back. You decided your mother's love and support were things you could exploit while making fun of her with some woman who's clearly using you. She wasn't using me, Ethan said, but it sounded hollow even to him. I pulled out the investigator's report again, flipping to a specific page. Isabel Moreau has dated 3 other young men in the past 5 years, all of them from wealthy families, all of them with successful mothers. The pattern is clear, Ethan. She targets men like you, men who have complicated feelings about their mothers, who feel somehow inadequate, who are vulnerable to someone who validates their resentment. You weren't special to her. You were a type. That's not true, he said, but I could hear the doubt creeping in. The restraining order was filed because she harassed her ex-boyfriend and his family for months after he broke up with her. She showed up at his mother's workplace making scenes, sent hundreds of threatening messages, tried to destroy his mother's reputation in their community. Is that the kind of person you want in your life? Ethan's face was a mess of tears and snot and confusion. I thought she loved me. She said she loved me. She loved what you represented, Sophie said gently, speaking for the first time in a while. Access to wealth, to a family with resources, to a mother she could compete with and try to displace. I'm sorry, Ethan, but Dylan and I talked about our concerns weeks ago. There was something off about her from the beginning. Why didn't you say something? Ethan asked, looking at his brother. Would you have listened? Dylan shot back. You were completely under her influence. Every time we tried to have a conversation, you'd get defensive about her. You stopped returning my calls. You canceled plans. You chose her over everyone else in your life. That hit close to home for me. I'd noticed Ethan becoming more distant over the past few months, but I'd attributed it to him being busy with school, with his relationship, with growing up. I hadn't realized it was deliberate isolation, a classic manipulation tactic. I need you to understand something, I said, pulling Ethan's attention back to me. The financial support ending isn't just punishment. It's necessary. You're 24 years old, and you've never actually had to face real consequences for anything. I enabled that. I made it too easy for you to avoid growing up because I was trying to compensate for the times I wasn't there, for the moments I chose work over you. You always chose work over me, Ethan said, and there was real pain in his voice now, not just manipulation. Every school event, every important moment, you were at the office or with a client or expanding the business. Dylan got you when you were still trying to prove yourself. I got the successful version who was too busy to care. The words were like a knife, sharp and precise, and finding their mark perfectly, because there was truth in them, truth I'd been avoiding examining too closely. You're right, I said, and the admission seemed to surprise everyone at the table, including Ethan. I wasn't there as much as I should have been. I canceled that trip for your 21st birthday, and we never rescheduled. I missed performances and games and moments that mattered to you. I prioritized building my business, and you paid a price for that. Ethan looked up at me, something like hope flickering in his devastated expression. But, I continued, my voice hardening again, that doesn't excuse what you've done. Feeling neglected doesn't justify lying and stealing. Feeling like you were second place doesn't justify mocking me behind my back. You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt, asked for family therapy, confronted me like an adult. Instead, you let your resentment fester, and then you let someone exploit it. I didn't know how to talk to you, he said quietly. You're always so strong, so successful, so perfect. How was I supposed to tell you that I felt like a failure compared to everyone else in this family? By using words, Dylan said sharply. By being honest instead of passive-aggressive. By acting like an adult instead of a child having a tantrum. Dylan, enough, Richard said. To Ethan, he added, your brother's angry, but he cares about you. We all do. That's why this is so painful. If we didn't care, we'd just write you off and move on. But we're here, having this conversation, because we want you to be better than this. I want to be better, Ethan said, and I could hear genuine desperation in his voice. I don't know how I got here. I don't know when I became this person. When Isabel and I started dating, she just seemed to understand me, you know? She listened when I complained, validated my feelings, made me feel like I wasn't crazy for being frustrated. She validated you right into becoming someone who betrays his own mother, Sophie said quietly. That's how manipulation works, Ethan. It feels good at first. It feels like support. But really, it's someone feeding your worst impulses until you don't recognize yourself anymore. I watched my son process this, watched him trying to reconcile the person he thought he was with the evidence of what he'd actually done. It was painful to witness, but it was necessary. The loan agreement isn't negotiable, I said. You have 12 months to repay the $15,000 with 3% interest. That's more than fair, and it's legally binding. You can get a job, work while you finish your MBA, and pay me back in monthly installments. Where am I supposed to live? He asked, and I could hear the panic setting in. That's not my problem to solve anymore. You're an adult. You can find roommates, get a smaller place, budget like millions of other graduate students do. The apartment you're in now costs $3,000 a month. You can find something for a third of that if you're willing to compromise on location and amenities. What about my car? Return it by Monday, take the subway, get a bike, save up and buy something used. Those are your options. Mom? I can't. I need a car. I have class. You have what millions of people manage without, I interrupted. This is what I'm talking about, Ethan. You've been so sheltered, so comfortable, that you think basic necessities that other people work for are things you're entitled to. They're not. You have to earn them. I'll help you look for apartments, Dylan said, surprising everyone. Not pay for one, but help you find something affordable. And I'll help you work out a budget. But Ethan, you need to actually stick to it. No more credit cards you can't pay off. No more living beyond your means. Ethan looked at his brother with something like gratitude mixed with shame. Why would you help me after what I did? Because you're my brother, and I don't give up on family. But don't mistake this for me being okay with your behavior. I'm furious with you. You hurt Mom, you betrayed all of us, and you need to face the consequences. But I also remember who you were before Isabel, and I'm hoping that person is still in there somewhere. I felt tears pricking at my eyes for the first time that evening. Dylan had every right to walk away, to write off his brother as a lost cause. But he was choosing compassion alongside accountability, and I'd never been more proud of him. There's one more condition, I said, pulling out the final document from my folder. This is contact information for Dr. Patricia Morrison, a therapist who specializes in family dynamics and young adult issues. You will attend weekly sessions for a minimum of 6 months. This isn't optional. If you want any chance of rebuilding trust with this family, you need to do the work to understand how you got here and how to be different. I can't afford therapy, Ethan said. The first 6 months are paid for. After that, many therapists offer sliding scale fees, or you can use your student health services. But you're going, one way or another. Ethan stared at the paper with Dr. Morrison's information on it. What if I refuse? What if I don't do any of this? Then you're on your own completely, I said simply. No more family dinners, no more phone calls, no more relationship with any of us until you decide to grow up. Is that what you want? No, he whispered. No, I don't want that. Then prove it, not with words, Ethan, with actions. Show up to therapy, pay back the loan. Get a job and support yourself. Stop blaming everyone else for your problems and take responsibility for your life. Richard stood up from the table, walking over to where Ethan sat. He placed his hand on our son's shoulder, and I saw Ethan flinch slightly, as if expecting to be hit. Instead, Richard squeezed gently. Your mother is giving you a gift, Richard said. She could press charges. She could cut you off completely and never speak to you again. Instead, she's giving you a path forward, a way to earn back trust and respect. Don't waste it. Ethan nodded, unable to speak through his tears. I loved her, he finally managed to say. I really thought Isabel loved me back. I know, I said, and I meant it. That's how people like her work. They find your weaknesses and exploit them. They make you feel special and understood while they're actually isolating you and using you. You're not the first person to fall for it, and you won't be the last. But Ethan, you were vulnerable to that manipulation because you'd already decided I was the enemy. You'd already convinced yourself that I was this controlling, distant figure instead of a flawed human being who made mistakes while trying her best. I did think that, he admitted. I was so angry at you for so long, and I didn't even realize how much until Isabel started pointing it out. She made it seem like all my problems were your fault. Some of your feelings are valid, I said carefully. I should have been more present. I should have noticed you were struggling. I should have made more time for just the two of us. Those are things I regret, things I would change if I could. But you're responsible for how you responded to those feelings. You chose deception over honesty. That's on you. Sophie had been mostly quiet, but now she spoke up. Ethan, can I ask you something? When did you start calling your mother the old controller? He looked uncomfortable. I don't know. Maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And when did the credit card debt start getting really bad? Around the same time. And when did Isabel start suggesting you needed to become more independent from your mother? Around... Oh, I watched realization dawn on his face. You think she escalated everything on purpose? I think she saw an opportunity and exploited it, Sophie said. She took legitimate feelings you had and twisted them into something toxic. She encouraged your worst behavior and made you think it was empowerment. That's what abusers do. The word abuser hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. But it was accurate. Isabel had been emotionally abusive, manipulating Ethan's insecurities for her own ends. I'm such an idiot, Ethan said, dropping his head into his hands. You're young and you made bad choices, Richard corrected. That doesn't make you an idiot. It makes you human. But now you know better, so you need to do better. I looked at my younger son, broken and exposed across the table from me, and felt something shift in my chest. The anger was still there, solid and real. The hurt hadn't diminished, but underneath it, there was still love. Complicated, wounded, conditional for now love, but love nonetheless. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, I said. I'm not going to sweep it under the rug and act like everything's fine. You violated my trust in the deepest way possible, and it's going to take a long time for me to believe in you again. But Ethan, I want you to succeed. I want you to become the man I know you're capable of being. This is your chance to prove that tonight was rock bottom, not just another step down. I'll do whatever it takes, he said. I'll go to therapy. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll show you I can be better. Good, I said, because I'm not interested in apologies anymore. I'm interested in change. 3 months have passed since that devastating dinner, and I'm sitting in my office at the boutique, looking at a payment notification on my phone. Ethan has just made his 3rd monthly installment on the loan. $500, exactly on time, just like the previous 2 months. It's not the money that matters. It's what the payment represents. The week after our confrontation was brutal. Ethan moved out of our house and into a tiny studio apartment in Alston that he found on Craigslist. It's a far cry from the spacious 2-bedroom I'd been paying for, but it's clean and safe, and most importantly, it's his. He pays for it himself with money from the job he got as a business analyst at a small consulting firm. The hours are long and the pay isn't spectacular, but he shows up every day. Dylan helped him move, the two of them spending an entire Saturday hauling boxes up 3 flights of stairs in an old brownstone. Sophie told me later that they'd barely spoken during the move, but by the end of the day, they'd shared a beer on Ethan's new fire escape and started talking. Really talking, for the first time in months. The car was harder for him to give up than I'd expected. I watched him hand over the keys with tears in his eyes, and I'd felt a flicker of something that might have been regret. But then I reminded myself that this wasn't cruelty. This was consequence. This was teaching him that nothing in life is guaranteed except what you earn yourself. He takes the T to work now, the green line that's packed with commuters and students and everyone else trying to make a living in this city. He told me in our first supervised conversation 2 weeks after the dinner that riding the subway every day has given him perspective. I see all these people working so hard, he'd said, and I realize I've been living in a bubble where I thought I was special, like I deserved more than them just because of who my parents are. Therapy has been good for him. Dr. Morrison called me after his first session, with his permission, to say that he was genuinely engaging with the process. He's not just going through the motions, she'd told me. He's actually doing the work to understand his behavior patterns. I'd asked if she thought he could change, really change, and she'd been honest with me. That depends entirely on him. I can give him tools, help him see things clearly, but he has to choose to use what he learns. The fact that he's here voluntarily, paying his own co-pays after your 6 months are up, that's a good sign. Richard and I have been going to couples therapy too, something I hadn't expected. Our therapist, Dr. James Chen, helped us process not just what happened with Ethan, but our own roles in the family dynamics that led to it. I've had to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself, about how I used work as a shield sometimes, how I solved problems with money because it was easier than being emotionally present, how I let guilt drive too many of my parenting decisions. You were trying to be everything, Dr. Chen told me in one session. The perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect businesswoman. But perfect doesn't exist, Vivian. And in trying to achieve it, you missed seeing what your son actually needed from you. Richard had squeezed my hand during that session as I'd cried. Real, ugly crying that I'd been holding in for months. You did the best you could with what you knew, he'd said. We both did. Now we know better. Dylan and Sophie had us over for dinner last month, and they invited Ethan too. It was awkward at first, all of us navigating this new dynamic where my younger son was no longer the child we indulged, but an adult who had to earn his place at the table. But by dessert, we were laughing about something stupid Dylan had done at work, and for a moment it felt almost normal. I miss this, Ethan had said quietly as we were leaving. I miss being part of the family. You are part of the family, I told him. You always were. That never changed. What changed is the terms of engagement. He'd nodded, understanding. I'm going to keep working to deserve being here. Margaret has been my rock through all of this, as she always is. She took me to a spa day last week and forced me to actually relax for the first time in months. You did the right thing, she told me, over cucumber water and face masks. It was hard, but it was right. And look, he's actually becoming a functional adult. Who knew consequences could be so effective? I'd laughed, but she'd turned serious. Vivian, I need to tell you something. I've known you for 20 years, and I've watched you build an empire, raise 2 sons, survive challenges that would have destroyed other people. But these past few months, watching you set boundaries and stick to them even when it hurt, that's the strongest I've ever seen you. Her words meant more than she probably knew. The boutique has been my sanctuary through all of this. Work has always been where I feel most competent, most in control. But I've made changes there too. I've hired an additional project manager so I can take more time for myself. I've started leaving the office by 6 instead of 8. I've learned that the business won't collapse if I'm not micromanaging every detail. Last week, I had lunch with a potential new client, a woman in her early 30s who reminded me of myself at that age. She was ambitious, driven, apologizing for checking her phone because her babysitter kept texting her. Don't apologize, I told her. Your kids come first. Trust me. I learned that lesson the hard way. She'd looked relieved, and we'd spent the next hour talking not just about her project, but about balancing motherhood and career, about the guilt that comes with ambition, about how to be successful without losing yourself or your family in the process. I gave her my cell number and told her to call me anytime, not just about business. Women need to support each other, I'd said, especially when we're trying to do it all. Ethan and I have coffee every other Sunday now. Neutral territory, a cafe in Cambridge, halfway between his apartment and our house. We talk about his therapy, his job, his goals. We don't talk about Isabel unless he brings her up, which he rarely does. I saw her downtown last week, he'd mentioned at our last coffee. She was with another guy, younger, looked like he had money. She didn't see me, or if she did, she pretended not to. How did that make you feel? I'd asked, channeling Dr. Morrison. Honestly? Relieved? And kind of embarrassed that I fell for it so completely, but also grateful, in a weird way. If she hadn't pushed things so far, if you hadn't found those messages, I might still be living in that delusion. I might have married her, or something equally stupid. I'd reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You're learning. That's what matters. Do you think you'll ever trust me again? He'd asked, and I could hear real fear in his voice. I think trust is something we rebuild slowly, I told him honestly. Every payment you make on time, every therapy session you attend, every honest conversation we have, those are bricks in the foundation. Eventually, we'll have something solid again. But it takes time. I have time, he'd said. I'm not going anywhere. Richard and I went to dinner last night, just the 2 of us, something we haven't done nearly enough in recent years. We talked about traveling more, about maybe selling the house eventually and downsizing, about what our lives might look like now that both sons are finally, truly independent. Do you have any regrets? He'd asked me over wine. About how you handled everything with Ethan? I'd thought about it carefully. I regret that it took something so devastating to force change. I regret that he felt he couldn't talk to me about his feelings. I regret the years I prioritized work over presence. But do I regret cutting him off financially and making him face consequences? No, that was necessary. That might have saved him. You saved him, Richard had corrected, by loving him enough to let him fall and then giving him a path to climb back up. This morning I got an email from Ethan. Just a few lines. Mom, I got a promotion at work. Small raise, but it means I can make bigger payments on the loan. Also, Dr. Morrison says I'm making real progress. She thinks I'll be ready to reduce to bi-weekly sessions soon. I'm proud of myself, and I hope you can be proud of me too. Love, Ethan. I read it 3 times, feeling tears prick at my eyes. Not tears of sadness this time, but something else. Something like hope. I wrote back, I'm proud of the work you're doing to become the man you want to be. Keep going. Love, Mom. Simple words, but they felt right. No overpromising, no rushing to fix everything, no money offered. Just acknowledgement and encouragement. I look around my office now, at the business I built, the life I've created, the challenges I've overcome. The woman who started with $50,000 and a dream is the same woman who had the strength to cut off her own son when he needed to learn to stand on his own. I'm not the old controller, no matter what Ethan called me in his darkest moments. I'm Vivian Ashford. I'm a mother who made mistakes and owned them. I'm a wife in a strong partnership. I'm a businesswoman who built something lasting. I'm a woman who learned that the hardest act of love is sometimes letting go. The phone on my desk rings. It's the intercom from reception. Mrs. Ashford, your 3 o'clock is here. I'll be right out, I say, standing and smoothing my dress. I catch my reflection in the window before I leave my office. Gray threaded hair, lines around my eyes that weren't there a few years ago, a face that shows every one of my 56 years and every challenge I've faced. I look strong. I look like someone who survived. And for the first time in months, I smile at my reflection without any reservation. This is who I am. This is who I've always been. And I'm not apologizing for it anymore. I walk out to meet my client, ready for whatever comes next.